Okay, welcome to the People and Place Crossroads of Northern BC virtual field trip.
And welcome to the Canadian Association of Geographers Conference hosted by the University of Northern British Columbia in the city of Prince George and on the traditional territory of the Lheidli T'enneh. I'm your host, Laura Ryser.
And I'm your host, Greg Halseth. Today we're going to take you through a virtual field trip across time and space as we explore the complex issues that have shaped the development of downtown Prince George. Drone footage today has been provided courtesy of Darrin, Rigo. Our story will be divided into two parts. We'll start by exploring the long history of the Lheidli T'enneh settlement in this area and the early contact between the Lheidli T'enneh and European settlers. A contact that is now being confronted through various reconciliation processes underway in the city. This first part will wrap up with the arrival of the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway and the transformation of competing town sites that would eventually shape Prince George's downtown.
And then we'll look at how different stakeholders are tackling issues of sustainability in today's downtown Prince George. These pursuits, of course, are not just focused on addressing issues related to climate change, but are also focused on addressing the social and housing pressures of our most vulnerable populations, rebuilding relationships with the Lheidli T'enneh, and strengthening the economic and cultural viability of the downtown core. So let's start our journey.
Prince George is situated on the central interior plateau at the confluence of the Fraser and Nechako rivers. Here, the Nechako River comes in from the bottom and links with the Fraser River, looping in at the top of the screen. An area that has been home to the Lheidli T'enneh people for more than 9,000 years. In fact, Lheidli T'enneh means people where the rivers meet. The Lheidli T'enneh have used this whole region, hunting, trapping, and trading, connecting them to their neighbors and building a socially, economically, and politically integrated region. Each fall, the Lheidli T'enneh would return to their winter village areas at the confluence of these rivers. The salmon runs from the Pacific provided food that would help feed the people through the winter. The rivers provided fish, water, and easy pathways of transportation in both summer and winter. While the impacts of the European organized fur trade were reaching the Lheidli T'enneh and their traditional territory long before the Europeans themselves, it was in 1807 that the fur trade post of Fort George was established by Simon Fraser as he was working for the Northwest Company. Shortly after its amalgamation with the Hudson's Bay Company, a new trading post was established in 1823. These trading posts were established close to the confluence of the Nechako and Fraser rivers, as these vital waterways functioned as the primary transportation routes for fur traders and indigenous people across the region. The Fort George Indian Reserve No. 1, located right at the confluence of the two rivers, was established in 1894. Fur traders and the native village had existed with little change for a century until settlers began to arrive in anticipation that the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway would pass near Fort George.
The Grand Trunk Pacific Railway was incorporated in 1903. It was intended to run from Winnipeg in Manitoba all the way through Prince George and terminate in Prince Rupert along the north coast of British Columbia. It was to be the competitive railway to the CP rail line. In this video, across northern BC, the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway arrival started new settlement and the rise of an interior forest industry. Rapid speculation about its route and station within the city would impact property values and lead to 3 town site developments proposed by land speculators, resulting in a series of conflicts. These 3 proposed town sites became known as the 3 Georges: South Fort George, Central Fort George, and Prince George. At the Paddle Wheel Steamboat Landing, South Fort George began when town site lots were marketed in 1909. In competition to South Fort George was Central Fort George, officially known as Fort George, a town site location on the Nechako River about 2.5 kilometers west of the fur post. Promoted as the location for the station of the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway that was still to arrive, the first town site lots were also marketed late in 1909. The last of the three Georges town sites was the one developed by the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway.
The first order of business for the Grand Trunk Pacific was to obtain land. During this period, the Lheidli rejected multiple offers from the railway for the sale of Indian Reserve No. 1. However, the railway eventually purchased the Indian Reserve in 1912 with the assistance of the Department of Indian Affairs Indian agent. And in 1913, the last of the Lheidli were forced off of the village site, and the village itself was burned. In total, the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway acquired portions of 23 reserves across northern British Columbia. The railway was interested, of course, in these reserve sites because they were typically located at village sites that contained land most suitable for development.
Once the rail town site was established, the rival town sites began to decline. The city of Prince George was incorporated in 1915. Eventually, boundary expansions absorbed Central Fort George in 1953 and South Fort George in 1975. Prince George was a planned town laid out by Boston landscape firm called Brett, Hull and Company, employed by the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway using the City Beautiful model. This model encompasses monumental public buildings, large boulevards, park systems, as well as diagonal avenues leading to city squares and circular streets. When this model was applied to Prince George, George Street was supposed to be featured as a prominent road with City Hall at one end and the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway Station at the other. This is demonstrated in its design as the only north-south oriented street with storefronts in the downtown core. The bankruptcy of the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway and the slowing of the rail traffic across northern BC during the First World War and the Depression led to a long period of stagnation for Prince George. There was little population growth and little development within the downtown area.
Yes, after decades of stagnation, it was during the 1960s and the construction of 3 pulp mills and a number of supporting sawmills that led to rapid residential development west and southwest of the original city area. By 1981, after these mills were up and running, the population of the area was around 68,000 people. Few of these new residents, however, were living in or near the original downtown core. Instead, it was suburban growth that supported this massive population increase. Together with the suburbanization of the population came suburbanization of the city's shopping and services. The expansion of the Parkwood, the Spruceland, and the Pine Center shopping malls all reduced the downtown share of the retail sector. Shown in this photo is the Spruceland shopping center. By the late 1960s, there were serious questions about the viability of Prince George's downtown core.
Throughout the 1980s, there were several proposals to guide downtown revitalization. These projects called for enhanced winter lighting and the use of deciduous trees to provide color from spring to fall without absorbing as much light as coniferous trees in the winter. In 1999, the city of Prince George completed climate-sensitive design guidelines, and some elements of this guide have since been incorporated into the official community plan. Today, the city, with an estimated population of 74,000, is facing the challenge of creating a sustainable city environmentally, socially, and economically. In 2011, the city installed the district energy system in the downtown core to provide heat and hot water, improve air quality, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The goal was to displace more than 36,000 gigajoules of natural gas currently burned, resulting in a reduction of more than 1,800 tons of greenhouse gases. The district energy system is based at Lakeland Mills and relies on sawdust and wood waste to provide hot water heat specific facilities in the downtown core, such as the Four Seasons Pool, the Coliseum, the Public Library, the Art Gallery, City Hall, and more recently, the new RCMP detachment. By September 2019, 50 businesses had completed carbon footprint analyses with the support of students at UNBC in order to reduce carbon emissions or become carbon neutral. Examples include Northern Lights Estate Winery, Timberline Footfitters, EDI Dynamics, Nancy O's Restaurant, Trench Brewing, Two Rivers Gallery, and more. Carbon footprint analyses, of course, are the first step in an overall evaluation of businesses in terms of their environmental and economic sustainability.
In 2011, the City of Prince George adopted an active transportation plan to encourage a more active community, reduce carbon emissions, and address air quality issues. Since 2001, more than 100 kilometers of new bike lanes have been developed as part of the Cycle Network plan. The city has also revamped its bus service by providing more frequent routes and free bus service on air quality advisory days. The U-Pass system provides UNBC and College of New Caledonia students with a bus pass as well as free access to civic swimming pools for $48 a month. In non-COVID years, bus service to both UNBC and CNC is packed with riders due to the convenience and low cost of the U-Pass system. Downtown revitalization itself has been supported by publicly funded investments in a civic center, a renovated public library, an art gallery, and a courthouse. The development of the courthouse, however, was completed following the demolition of 2 single-room occupancy hotels, resulting in the loss of approximately 40 affordable housing units for the city's vulnerable population. The social crisis in the downtown core deepened following an influx of people evacuated from other rural areas impacted by a series of forest fires in 2017 and 2020, as well as by issues such as the ongoing opioid epidemic. There have also been renewed efforts to invest in social housing in the downtown core. In 2002, the Active Support Against Poverty Society opened the Bridget Moran Place in a former heritage building. It was developed in direct response to the loss of those 2 hotels that housed up to 40 low-income residents in order to accommodate the courthouse. Bridget Moran was a well-known social worker and local author who wrote several First Nations biographies. The facility is home to an emergency shelter on the first floor and 28 studio suites on the second. The development, however, faced strong opposition from nearby businesses in the downtown core. As well, the Elizabeth Fry Place opened in 2012, providing 36 low-cost apartments for seniors and people with disabilities. The City of Prince George provided the land for the project, valued at almost $1 million, as well as a tax exemption worth roughly $34,000 annually. The complex allows seniors to live in close proximity to the Downtown Seniors Activity Center, the Seniors Council, and various healthcare specialist offices.
Today, BC Housing and the City of Prince George are partnering to develop up to 150 affordable housing units along First Avenue that will include integrated healthcare services to address the needs of vulnerable residents. The city provided the land for the 2-phase project. Phase 1 will focus on developing 50 units for those experiencing or at risk for homelessness. The facility will include 24-hour support services as well as meal programs, life and employment skills training, and health and wellness supports. Construction of Phase 1 will begin this year and is expected to be completed in 2022. Phase 2 will develop the remaining 100 affordable housing units. These investments will complement 2 homeless service hubs that were launched in 2019 through a partnership between the City of Prince George, BC Housing, the Prince George Native Friendship Center, and the Association Advocating for Women and the Community. The first site, located on Quebec Street, offers storage, washrooms, and outreach support. The second site, located on George Street, provides storage, washrooms, shower facilities, laundry, and outreach support. As a regional service center, of course, it's very important for Prince George to be ready with social, health, and other culturally appropriate supports and services. The city has also been providing incentives to encourage private sector housing investments. For example, a 6-story, 200-unit student housing project is under construction in the downtown core next to the public library. A 10-year municipal tax exemption was provided to support the project. Bringing people to live in the downtown core continues to be a key part of all revitalization schemes. In order to strengthen the recreational assets for downtown residents, a referendum was passed to use municipal resources and other grants to replace the Four Seasons swimming pool, an aging asset, and thus ensure that the city would continue to be serviced by 2 municipal aquatic centers. And in the last stop of our tour, we want to return to where settlement in the area started. We are circling back to explore the ways in which the Prince George city is embarking on a new era where there is a recognized need to reconcile the tragedies associated with our colonial past. The local government have pursued several initiatives to renew relationships with the Lheidli T'enneh First Nation. During the city's 100-year anniversary in 2015, the city renamed Fort George Park to Lheidli T'enneh Memorial Park in order to recognize an area that was once the Lheidli T'enneh village.
Even though there is a designated burial ground within the park, there are many unmarked graves throughout the area. In fact, the remains of 11 Lheidli T'enneh ancestors were discovered during an archaeological excavation prior to the construction of this new Lheidli T'enneh Pavilion in 2017. In 2015, the Lheidli T'enneh became the first Indigenous hosts of the Canada Winter Games, co-hosting along with the city of Prince George. The city of Prince George, the Fraser Fort George Regional District, and the Lheidli T'enneh have signed a Memorandum of Understanding on Cooperation and Communication. They signed this on National Indigenous Peoples Day in 2017. As part of this, there are staff-to-staff meetings, and it involves training opportunities in order to increase the awareness about Indigenous history, cultural sensitivity, and the duty to consult. The Lheidli T'enneh also have representation on the city's Economic Development Committee. And in 2019, the University of Northern British Columbia and the Lheidli T'enneh signed an agreement that waives tuition fees and allows band members to attend university at the undergraduate level for free.
So the city is at a crossroads where it must continue to build on efforts that recognize the importance of people and place. As many stakeholders throughout the city continue to engage in reconciliation processes with the Lheidli T'enneh, there are opportunities to strengthen our collective awareness of past colonial conflicts and move together to chart a stronger and a more collaborative future. As we look again at the downtown, it continues to be challenged by aging commercial infrastructure, a lack of social and cultural infrastructure, and a lack of housing. But a new generation of entrepreneurial leadership is starting to transform the downtown by investing in new commercial and pedestrian-friendly spaces and supporting investments in green infrastructure. And after rapid growth and suburbanization led to the decline of the downtown core, local leadership must continue to support investments that create vibrant housing assets, public spaces, and services that will lead to a vibrant social, cultural, economic, and environmentally appropriate downtown core for the city. That concludes our virtual field trip. Thank you for coming on today, and thank you for helping UNBC host the 2021 annual meeting of the Canadian Association of Geographers Conference.